Hey, what's going on, guys? We're going to be addressing the 9/11 Commission staff statements regarding intelligence, domestic intelligence reports in the summer of 2000, 2001. And what you'll see in the next 30 minutes is a slew of information that was not acted upon. Also, was a lot of information from the intelligence services, namely the NSA, CIA, that was withheld from the FBI and as well as the federal government. And what I'll do is I'm going to fill in the blanks because even the 9/11 Commission states that there was an overwhelming amount of information regarding these key period of 2000, 2001, whereas in the same commission, you had CIA officials that were basically saying, we didn't have enough information. So you could, all these people in the truth movement that say, oh, the 9/11 Commission is lying and stuff like that. Well, that's not necessarily the case all the time. So let's get right to it. And this is going to be Philip Zelikow, the director, and Chris Kojum, and two others. So here we go.
We have built upon the substantial work carried out by the joint inquiry of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. We've obtained excellent cooperation from the CIA, the FBI, and the Office of Inspector General of the Department of Justice. They made significant material available for the preparation of this statement. I'd like to draw you now to page 2 of the statement, beginning with the spring of 2001, and turn the floor over to Chris Kojum, my deputy.
In spring 2001, the level of reporting on terrorist threats and planned attacks began to increase dramatically, representing the most significant spike in activity since the millennium. At the end of March, the intelligence community disseminated a terrorist threat advisory indicating there was a heightened threat of Sunni extremist terrorist attacks against U.S. facilities, personnel, and other interests in the coming weeks.
This is before the release of the Phoenix memo, right? That's the memorandum written by Special Agent Ken Williams out of Phoenix. And where did this information come from? Well, it came from the Millennium Plot, right? You had a heightened alert regarding bin Laden wanting to attack the United States inside the states using aircraft. Now, this is the spring of 2001, where they still had time to give the Federal Aviation Administration and other federal agencies like the INS enough time to implement stricter security measures. Well, obviously that didn't happen, right? And you could go back to even the mid-90s when there was threat matrix reports regarding threats to aviation in 96. This is the Pachinko plot, but this is rather recent. And this comes from the interrogation of Ahmed Rassam, who is a part of the Millennium Plot. And of course, in the summer of 2001, there were much more reports, including the presidential daily brief of August 6th, bin Laden determined to strike inside the United States. Why didn't the local, state, and federal agencies take these warnings seriously? I don't know what to tell you because we had the warnings there.
In April and May 2001, the drumbeat of reporting increased. Articles presented to top officials contained headlines such as, quote, bin Laden planning multiple operations, close quote. Quote, bin Laden public profile may presage attack, close quote. Quote, bin Laden networks plans advancing, close quote. By late May, there were reports of a hostage plot against Americans to force the release of prisoners, including Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman,
Right.
the blind sheikh, who was serving a life sentence for his role in the 1993 plot to blow up sites in New York City. The reporting noted that the operatives may opt to hijack an aircraft or storm a U.S. embassy. The reporting also mentioned that Abu Zubaydah was planning an attack and expected to carry out more if things went well. The U.S. government redoubled efforts, ongoing since late 1999, to capture Abu Zubaydah.
And by the way, just to add, all right, this is 2004, as you can see by the date at the bottom, it's April 13, 2004. 2 years later, the CIA would admit and this is in the Associated Press, would admit that Abu Zubaydah was not Al Qaeda or a high-ranking member of Al Qaeda, and that even after a couple of months of torture at CIA black sites, no real good information came from the torture of him. And the FBI, they were the first to interview Abu Zubaydah. In fact, Ali Soufan, an FBI agent out of New York City, who was a tutor under John O'Neill, counterterrorism, he was the first to reach Abu Zubaydah, and he was getting somewhere with him. CIA heard about this. Tenet, the DCI, heard about this, and he went to complain with Bush and said we should take over the interrogation of Zubaydah. And what they do? Well, they tortured him. Either the CIA is actually stupid and just ignorant of their own past history and regarding torture, and it doesn't work, or there is a nefarious plot underway of torturing these people because of something that they might say or something that they might not say. Now, unfortunately, we don't know the answer to that because, like I said in previous videos, even if people like Abu Zubaydah or Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or Ramzi bin Ashib or Tawfiq bin Attash or Amr al-Baluchi or Mustafa al-Hassawi, these are all people involved with the planning and alleged planning and logistical support for the 9/11 attacks. Even if they all told the truth, we won't know, right? Because they were tortured. We're always stuck with, did they really tell the truth? Or, was it all made up? We don't know. That's exactly where they want you. It's exactly where they want you.
National Counterterrorism Coordinator Clark also called National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice's attention to possible plots in Yemen and Italy, and by an alleged cell in Canada that might be planning an attack against the United States. Reports similar to these were made available to President Bush in morning meetings with DCI Tenet, usually attended by Vice President Cheney and National Security Advisor Rice as well. None of these reports mention that the attacks might occur in the United States. At the end of May, Counterterrorism Center Chief Cofer Black told Rice that the current threat level was a 7 on a scale of 10 as compared to an 8 during the millennium. The threat reports surged again.
Now that's interesting because the CIA and the NSA already knew that 2 al-Qaeda operatives were inside the United States, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Waqar al-Hazmi, and that they were living in Los Angeles and then later San Diego. And this information was withheld from the FBI, right? So, and by default, the Department of State. Now, if you're the CIA and you think the attacks are happening abroad, yet you have 2 members of Al Qaeda that just came from a high-level summit meeting in Malaysia of Al Qaeda hierarchy and affiliates, 1 + 1 = 2. But to the CIA, it's 1 + 1 = 16, right? Nevertheless, like I said, either they're just stupid or something nefarious is afoot. Now, it's very well that the theory is true that they were trying to turn these 2 guys to get moles, spies inside Al Qaeda. That was the goal in '99 when George Tenet told Cofer Black, the director of this counterterrorism center, to come up with a plan, which was nicknamed the Plan, real ingenious title, of getting contacts inside Al Qaeda, because at that point they didn't have any. All right, so it very well could be the case, but they involved the Saudis on their behalf because they don't have Arab linguists. And of course, a CIA officer, field officer, is not going to really play the part well regarding being a Saudi or Arab fundamentalist. You can get Arab fundamentalists to do that, but you would have to involve Saudi General Intelligence Directorate, the intelligence arm, to become part of this operation, but we have to keep it secret. Well, that's not a theory anymore because with the Candace Trail document, as well as the FBI's Operation Encore files, we know this to be the case.
in June and July, reaching an even higher peak of urgency. A terrorist threat advisory in late June indicated that there was a high probability of near-term spectacular terrorist attacks resulting in numerous casualties. Headlines from intelligence reports were stark. Quote, bin Laden threats are real, close quote. Quote, bin Laden planning high-profile attacks, close quote. The intelligence reporting consistently described the upcoming attacks as occurring on a catastrophic level, indicating that they would cause the world to be in turmoil, consisting of possible multiple, but not necessarily simultaneous attacks. A late
Look, this you have to stand in awe, right? The joint inquiry even states that Carl Levin, bless his heart, he read a detailed summary. It took him 4 minutes to give a timeline of intelligence warnings that were there starting in 96 to 2001 that bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, it was no secret. You know, the real conspiracy is that the intelligence services are telling you, oh, we didn't have the information. That's not what they're reading here, right? Congressional officials like Chris Okojim and Carl Levin, they're telling you, hey, this information was awash. And it comes from the domestic services. Also, in the summer of 2001, where Kojim is actually referring to as well in his statement, foreign intelligence on top of it are telling you Italy, Canada, Germany, France, even Israel and Saudi Arabia. I mean, some of these reports are vague, but they're there. Hey, bin Laden's going to attack you. They're inside the country. They want to use planes as weapons. The conspiracy is this. There was so much information, but we didn't do anything with it. Name me a point in time where we had a 5-year window where intelligence was stating that there is a threat to aviation in the United States by radical Arab fundamentalists. The essence of these threats are coming from bin Laden. Now, you had a number of daily threat reports and presidential meetings, which are basically principals meetings, where members of the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, and local and federal intelligence meet with the cabinet at the White House, and they talk about the current threat to national security. I don't know what to tell you, you know, whoever's watching this. For years, they had plans to kill bin Laden. And starting under the Clinton administration, yeah, that's right, Bill Clinton, the Clinton administration. And on the day of September 11, 2001, there's an audio of bin Laden, of Clinton stating that I could have gotten bin Laden, I could have killed him, but that means I could have killed a lot of people in Kandahar in Afghanistan. Well, heck, man, let's go back to 92, 93, where there was a CIA field officer named Billy Waugh, who was living in Africa. By the way, he was one of the few people to capture Carlos the Jackal, along with Kofor Black, who bin Laden, by the way, put a kill list on, Kofor Black. Billy Waugh used to jog and act like a fitness instructor where bin Laden lived in Sudan. And he used to report back saying, I'm close enough where I could probably kill him. But it was rejected all the time. The CIA would go to to Clinton in the principals meetings and basically hold these reports saying that we could kill bin Laden in this manner, in this manner. No, they're rejected all the time. I mean, even Michael Scheuer would come up with, you know, really outlandish plots, including one where there was a meeting with bin Laden and Yemeni princes in Kandahar, where they can actually drop a bomb because they didn't have drone strikes back then. It was just a new idea, drone strike, 96, 97 and nobody really wanted to do that. In fact, there was a principals meeting where the CIA and the Pentagon, there was an argument in one instance where they were going to say, hey, why doesn't the CIA use this drone program to assassinate bin Laden? They said, well, we're not in the assassination business. Yeah, the CIA said this. Now, that's coming from the pressure that the CIA was trying to repair under the Church hearings in 1977, where they brought to light all the nefarious assassination plots by the CIA. That all ended. Tenet came in 97, I think 96. He was sworn in, wanted to reformat the CIA to more of a public, a positive public view, trying to repair the image. Well, after 9/11, wow, talk about an about face. So there was a lot of activity in 2001 where the information was not acted upon.
June report stated that bin Laden operatives expect near-term attacks to have dramatic consequences of catastrophic proportion. Rice told us Clark and his counterterrorism and security group were the nerve center in coordinating responses, but that principals were also involved. In addition to his daily meetings with President Bush and weekly meetings to go over other issues with National Security Advisor Rice, Tenet continued his regular meetings with Secretary Powell and Secretary Rumsfeld. The foreign policy principals talked on the phone every day on a variety of subjects, including the threat. The summer threats seemed to be focused on Saudi Arabia, Israel, Bahrain, Kuwait, Yemen, and possibly Rome, but the danger could be anywhere, including a possible attack on the G8 summit in Genoa, where air defense measures were taken. Disruption operations were launched involving 20 countries. Several terrorist operatives were detained by foreign governments, possibly disrupting operations in the Gulf and Italy, and perhaps averting attacks against 2 or 3 U.S. embassies. U.S. armed forces in at least 6 countries were placed on higher alert. Units of the Fifth Fleet were redeployed. Embassies were alerted. Vice President Cheney contacted Crown Prince Abdullah to get more Saudi help. DCI Tenet phoned or met with approximately 20 top security officials from other countries. Deputy National Security Advisor Hadley apparently called European counterparts. Clark worked with senior officials in the Gulf. At Rice's request, on July 5th, the CIA briefed Attorney General John Ashcroft on the al-Qaeda threat, warning that a significant terrorist attack was imminent and a strike could occur at any time. That same day, officials from domestic agencies, including the Federal Aviation Administration, met with Clark to discuss the current threat. Rice worked directly with Tenet on security issues for the G8 summit. In addition to the individual reports, on July 11th, top officials received a summary recapitulating the mass of al-Qaeda-related threat reporting on several continents. Tenet told us that in his world, quote, the system was blinking red, close quote. And by late July, it could not have been any worse. Tenet told us.
Funny thing is that while all this is going on, the CIA and the NSA were withholding pertinent information. You already know what I'm talking about. Khalid al-Mihdhar al-Wahhabi being inside the United States. They didn't tell nobody. Now, I mean, look, let me play another video for you, okay? Because, good Lord, all right, here we have a perfect example, and I mean a perfect example of the current of the problem back in 2000, 2001, all right? Now, this is coming from the joint inquiry. Again, you've probably seen this video because I played it before. Now, this is Carl Levin, and he's just watch. All right. This is what I'm talking about. Now, with Chris Kojum, he's telling you that the CIA is meeting with, the National Security Counterterrorism Czar, Richard Clark. He's meeting with National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. There's a threat about bin Laden and stuff. But the most important information the CIA is withholding. Why? Well, let Carl Levin here, begin his inquiry. And no, that's not it. Here.
I think we have to know precisely, and perhaps we have to talk to the people other than the FBI agent who is here, who confirms what our staff report says to the best of his knowledge. I think this is such an important question that if there's any difference on this from the staff report, we should hear from the CIA. And I would ask our CIA officer who is here to take that request back, and if there is a difference that officer had recollection-wise as to what happened at that meeting, whether or not she did in fact refuse to let the FBI know in June of 2001 why the CIA was tracking these two men.
What?
Why they didn't say at that time that we knew that these two men had visas to the United States. The FBI still didn't know that. That still wasn't on the watch list as of June of 2001. Now, this is 16 months after the CIA knew that these men had visas to come to the United States, had entered the United States. Still, according to our staff report, there is this refusal on the part of the CIA to share this information.
Why?
And this is critically important information.
Oh, it's huge.
I think that we've got to have accountability in this system. And that failure is massive. And if that information should have been shared, and should have been shared a lot earlier, and if watch lists should have been entered, and if FBI should have been notified, which it seems to me it's clear all that should have happened, then we've got to know who is responsible for those failures.
We
if
know.
We're going to really break down walls, real and imaginary.
Yeah. You see, we already know now because it's years later. It's Wilshire, right? He's the deputy chief of Alex Station. Where's he getting his orders from? Richard Bleed, the chief of station, who took over in '99 over Michael Scheuer. That's where this is coming from. Now, this withholding of information comes from the director. It has to. And boy, how is this missed? The CIA is partly at fault here, and nobody got in trouble for it. Stunning.
He felt that President Bush and other officials grasped the urgency of what they were being told. On July 27th, Clark informed Rice and Hadley that the spike in signals intelligence about a near-term attack had stopped. He urged keeping readiness high during the August vacation period, warning that another report suggested an attack had just been postponed for a few months. On August 3rd, the intelligence community issued a threat advisory warning that the threat of impending al-Qaeda attacks would likely continue indefinitely. The advisory cited threats in the Arabian Peninsula, Jordan, Israel, and Europe, and suggested that al-Qaeda was lying in wait and searching for gaps in security before moving forward with the planned attack.
Notice it's all outside the United States, the warnings. It's not inside the United States. Meanwhile, the threat is brewing inside the United States.
Attacks.
Man.
During the spring and summer of 2001, President Bush had occasionally asked his briefers whether any of the threats pointed to the United States. Reflecting on these questions, the CIA decided to write a briefing article summarizing its understanding of this danger. The article, which the President received on August 6th, is attached to this staff statement. Despite the large number of threats received, there were no specifics regarding time, place, method, or target.
Right.
Disruption efforts continued. An al-Qaeda associate from North Africa connected to Abu Zubaydah was arrested in the United Arab Emirates on August 13th. He had apparently been planning an attack against the U.S. Embassy in Paris. CIA analysts who have recently reviewed the threat surge of the summer of 2001 told us they believe it may have been related to a separate stream of events. These threats may have been referring to the 9/11 attack, the planned assassination of Northern Alliance leader Ahmed Shah Massoud, or other operations. In July 2001, the CSG alerted federal law enforcement agencies and asked the FAA to send out security advisories. Beginning on July 27th, the FAA issued several security directives to U.S. air carriers prior to September 11th. In addition, the FAA issued a number of general warnings about potential threats, primarily overseas, to civil aviation. None of
this is another problem regarding this insistence that there is a threat to civil aviation overseas. Now, again, you know, the joint inquiry states that the threat, which was a report coming from the Bajinka plot, was basically coming from the intelligence of the Philippines telling you that there's a threat not overseas, but inside the United States.
We're watching for
And
something happening overseas.
again,
Right.
you know, me and Sean went over this together in a great collab I had with him. Go watch that video. And we played this video. I'll show you. Look, this is the same, you know, this is the joint inquiry again, where it's contradictory to what Chris Kojum is stating, right? The CIA, you know, the CIA is saying, oh, the threat, and the FAA, by the way, I'm sorry, not CIA, the FAA is saying the threat is overseas. This is where that report is coming from. Here, listen.
We're watching for something happening overseas. Let me deal into that a little bit. Bajinka happens in '95. FAA sent somebody over to Manila. Are you familiar with that? Are you familiar with the FAA sending a representative over to Manila?
Yes.
And what did they come back and say? What did that person report after going over to Manila and finding out that a member of Al Qaeda was going to hijack 12 American airplanes in a suicide fashion? I've got to get both words in here because you all say, geez, I didn't think they could commit suicide. There were 10 attacks by Al Qaeda against the United States from 1992 to 2001, and 9 of them were suicide. We knew by then that bin Laden was going to come after the United States. So what did the guy report when he came back in 1995? What did he tell you? And what was your response to it?
Well, my recollection, and I do not have specific recollection of what was said, but my general recollection was that the threat at that time, and continued up through September 11, was really directed outside the borders of the United States.
In 1998, after the East African Embassy bombing, Mr. Belger, it was in the newspaper that the United States of America federal government arrested 2 suspects that were in the United States. One in California, one in Texas.
Ali Muhammad and Wadi al-Had.
Why would you reach that conclusion, that they were only going to attack outside the United States?
The conclusion I reached, sir, was based on the intelligence information that was given to me.
Yeah, and who
I mean, I
gave
can't
that?
be any more.
I'm talking about
be any
stuff
more
that's
clear.
reported in the newspaper.
Okay, where did that report come from? It came from the CIA. Because we go back to what Mark Rossini, who's an FBI agent out of New York, who worked as a liaison officer at the CIA's virtual station, Bin Laden Issue Station, Cody Malik Station. What does he say when they saw the Central Intelligence report about Khalid al-Mihdhar al-Wahbi inside the United States? Well, he says that when they tried to write a draft report warning headquarters about them inside the United States, a CIA analyst named Michelle Ann Casey told Mark Rossini not to share that information because we think the next attack is Southeast Asia. So that's where this essence of this threat to Southeast Asia comes from. And that information was shared to the FAA. Now, Monty Belger ain't lying. Meanwhile, we have a connection that the CIA knew about, as well as the NSA, that 2 al-Qaeda operatives, both Khalid al-Mihdhar al-Wahbi, left Malaysia to Bangkok inside the United States. Why would they think the next attack is in Southeast Asia when you have 2 members of al-Qaeda inside the United States that came from a Malaysia summit meeting that were most likely, according to the intelligence report, that they were talking about the 9/11 operation? Now, it very well could be that the CIA speculated about the attacks in Southeast Asia because that's where the meeting was held, that they don't know specifics. It very well could be the case that they didn't know, but we don't know because they're withholding information. If they withheld information from the FBI, as well as the federal government, I wonder how much information they are withholding. Now, as well, as the foreign intelligence units that were operating inside the United States. This is what's not covered in the 9/11 Commission or the Joint House Inquiry, even though they both received copies of the Gerald Shea Memorandum with the Israelis monitoring everybody. The Saudis were at least monitoring Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf Azmi, and later Hani Hanjour. The Israelis had everybody. They had everybody, even the FBI, even the DEA, and other government buildings that they were surveilling. There was over 200 people involved. And they lived right next door to all the 9/11 hijackers. Hi, 9/11 Truth Movement. That's right. The hijackers you don't believe in, all these people don't exist. These operations don't exist either. Thanks. You're a big help. So what specifics do they have? They probably have the motherload. And you can manipulate an operation by knowing the operation beforehand. So, there's your problem, is that, again, the CIA is right in the middle of it.
These warnings required the implementation of additional aviation security measures. They urged air carriers to be alert. Although there was no credible evidence of an attack in the United States, Clark told us, the CSG arranged for the CIA to brief senior intelligence and security officials from the domestic agencies. The head of counterterrorism at the FBI, Dale Watson, said he had many discussions about possible attacks with Cofer Black at the CIA. They had expected an attack on July 4th. Watson said he felt deeply that something was going to happen, but he told us the threat information was nebulous. He wished he had known more. He wished he had had, quote, 500 analysts looking at Osama bin Laden threat information instead of 2, close quote. Rice and Hadley told us that, before September 11th, they did not feel they had the job of handling domestic security. They felt Clark and the CSG were the National Security Council's bridge between foreign and domestic threats. In late August, working-level CIA and FBI officials realized that one or more al-Qaeda operatives might be in the United States. We have found no evidence that this discovery was ever briefed to the CSG, to principals, or to senior counterterrorism officials at the FBI or the CIA. Nor was the...
That's because the NSA and the CIA withheld that information from you. And nobody was ever held accountable for it. Now, if you really wanted to hold these people's feet to the fire, why didn't the 9/11 Truth Movement do this earlier? Because they told you, people like David Ray Griffin and Alex Jones and Jason Burmis and Barbara Honegger, they all told you the 9/11 Commission is a lie. So that means that you didn't even bother reading the report or watching videos like this, where you would have caught on certain people within the intelligence services domestically, specifically the CIA, in perjury, which is what George Tenet did twice in the Joint House Inquiry, and also to the 9/11 Commission once. You would have had people like Tom Wilshire, the deputy director of Alex Station, basically lying as well. And they all, like Cofer Black, when they were interviewed, they all gave conflicting accounts about, oh, intelligence was shared. Oh, well, some information was shared. Well, no. You intentionally withheld information while telling the FAA and the principals that we think the next attack's in Southeast Asia.
The White House told about the arrest of Zacarias Moussaoui. We investigated awareness of the terrorist threat within the Department of Justice and the FBI during the spring and summer of 2001. Rice told us that she believed the FBI had tasked its 56 U.S. field offices to increase surveillance of suspected terrorists and to reach out to informants who might have information about terrorist plots. An NSC document at the time described such a tasking having occurred in late June, although it does not indicate whether the tasking was generated by the NSC or the FBI. At this point, we have found the following. On April 13th, FBI headquarters alerted field offices to a heightened threat from al-Qaeda against U.S. interests. The communication detailed the threats against U.S. interests abroad, but made no mention of any possible threat inside the United States. The field offices were asked to, quote, task all resources to include electronic databases and human sources for any information pertaining to the current operational activities relating to Sunni extremism, close quote. On July 2nd, the FBI Counterterrorism Division sent a message to federal agencies and state and local law enforcement agencies that summarized information regarding threats against U.S. interests from bin Laden. The message reported that there was an increased volume of threat reporting indicating a potential for attacks against U.S. targets abroad from groups aligned with or sympathetic to Osama bin Laden. It further stated, quote, the FBI has no information indicating a credible threat of terrorist attack in the United States, close quote. However, it went on to emphasize
because the FBI didn't have the necessary information from its own compatriots in the intelligence community, specifically the NSA and CIA.
that the possibility of attack in the United States could not be discounted. It also noted that the July 4th holiday might heighten the threats. The report asked the recipients to, quote, exercise vigilance, close quote, and, quote, report suspicious activities, close quote, to the FBI. Acting FBI Director Thomas Picard recently told us that during his summer telephone calls with special agents in charge of each FBI field office, he mentioned to each the heightened threat, among other subjects. He also told us that he had a conference call with all special agents in charge on July 19th, in which one of the items he mentioned was that they needed to have their evidence response teams ready to move at a moment's notice in case they needed to respond to an attack. We found in our field office visits last fall, however, that a number of FBI personnel, with the exception of those in the New York field office, did not recall a heightened sense of threat from al-Qaeda within the United States in summer 2001. For example, an international terrorism squad supervisor in the Washington field office told us that he was neither aware in summer 2001 of an increased threat, nor did his squad take any special steps or actions. The special agent in charge of the Miami field office told us he did not learn of the high level of threat until after September 11th. Picard said in late June and through July he met with Attorney General Ashcroft once a week. He told us that although he initially briefed the Attorney General regarding these threats, after two such briefings, the Attorney General told him he did not want to hear this information anymore. The Justice Department has informed us that Attorney General Ashcroft, his former deputy, and his chief of staff deny that the Attorney General made any such statement to Picard. Ashcroft told us that he asked Picard whether there was intelligence about attacks in the United States. Picard said he replied that he could not assure Ashcroft that there would be no attacks in the United States, although the reports of threats were related to overseas targets. Ashcroft said he therefore assumed that the FBI was doing what it needed to do. He acknowledged that, in retrospect, this was a dangerous assumption. Prior to 9/11, neither Ashcroft nor his predecessors received a copy of the President's daily brief. After 9/11, Ashcroft began to receive portions of the brief that relate to counterterrorism.
It is in this context that we return to the story of Midhar and Hazmi. While top officials in Washington were receiving and reacting to various threat reports, we need to step further down in the bureaucracy to trace a now significant story of how particular al-Qaeda associates were addressed by lower-level officials. In Staff Statement Number 2, presented at our January hearing, we discussed the complex story of successes and failures in tracking and identifying hijackers Khalid al-Midhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, Nawaf's brother Salim al-Hazmi, and the coal bomber Khalid. Those efforts had trailed off in January 2000. No one at CIA headquarters reacted to the March 2000 cable from Bangkok that someone named Nawaf al-Hazmi had traveled to the United States.
That's not true. And, this is tiring as fuck. They knew they were inside the United States. They withheld this information intentionally. I keep saying it time and time again. How many times do we have to say it? There is a concerted effort in the CIA to withhold information regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi inside the United States. Again, let's go back to the joint inquiry. Carl Levin, once again, just to show you, without me telling you, again, there was an intentional withholding of information. This is coming from the CIA's own man, Clark Shannon. That's who Carl Levin is referring to in this video as the analyst. Let's hear it.
And here's where I want to pick up with our witnesses. The CIA analyst who attended the New York meeting acknowledged to the Joint Inquiry staff that he had seen the information regarding al-Mihdhar's U.S. visa and al-Hazmi's travel to the U.S., but he stated that he would not share information outside of the CIA unless he had authority to do so and unless that was the purpose of the meeting.
Oh.
Now,
Again,
June 11th, New York.
the second meeting now.
Now we've got the FBI asking the CIA, would you tell us why you're following these two guys?
What?
And according to the CIA analyst, to our staff, that information was denied because no authority to do so, unless that's the purpose of the meeting. So
I don't need to go further with you. This is the CIA's own words. And, Carl Levin would ask George Tenet about this issue. And he says that, hey, we interviewed your man and he basically told us one thing and you're saying another. And George Tenet is saying, yeah. So he told you and he told us something different. That's what Carl Levin said. And George Tenet's like tongue-tied. Well, because the CIA is withholding from everybody about an illegal operation inside the United States, along with Saudi intelligence, and monitoring Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. But everybody who's watching my video knows this.
There were 3 episodes in 2001 when the CIA and/or the FBI had apparent opportunities to refocus on the significance of Hazmi and Mihdhar and reinvigorate the search for them. As in the 2000 story, the details are complex. We turn to the first episode, which is in January 2001, the identification of Khalid. Almost 1 year after the original trail had been lost in Bangkok, the January 2000 rendezvous of suspected terrorists in Kuala Lumpur resurfaced. The FBI and the CIA learned from a conspirator in the USS Cole attack in Yemen that a person he knew as Khalid had helped direct the Cole bombing. One of the members of the FBI's investigative team in Yemen realized he had previously heard of Khalid from a joint FBI-CIA source who had said Khalid was close to bin Laden. Khalid was also linked to the East Africa bombings in 1998. The FBI agent obtained from a foreign government a photo of the person believed to have directed the Cole bombing. The joint source confirmed the man in that photograph was the same Khalid he had described. In December 2000, based on some analysis of information associated with Khalid al-Mihdhar, the CIA's bin Laden station speculated that Khalid and Khalid al-Mihdhar might be one and the same. So, the CIA asked that a Kuala Lumpur surveillance photo of Mihdhar be shown to the joint source, who had already identified an official photograph of Khalid.
Well, wait a minute. Hold. Boy, oh boy. The CIA had a contact inside the NSA's operation of the Yemen hub, right? Now, the analyst is saying that the NSA heard a phone call in December of '99 between Khalid and Khalid. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you this. How did the CIA say that Khalid and Khalid were the same meeting? Were they fucking talking to each other? They're lying their fucking ass off. Lying themselves during the commission. And the truth movement will tell you, did you know a third building fell? The legacy media in this country, a bunch of fucking frauds that they are, well, they're not going to air this. Hell, they don't want to, disrupt the apple cart, because who controls the media? Well, a number of different, entities, one of them being the CIA. What do you think, Operation Mockingbird ended like this? Take a look at TV today. It's even worse than it was 10 years ago. Want to talk about manipulation, psychological operations? Look at your average voter. That's all I have to say. Look at what constitutes the left and the right, even though they're two parts of a wing of the same bird. And when they realize that there is no left and right, maybe they'll get an idea. But the CIA is even lying, because they knew from an analyst close to the NSA that Khalid, who's calling from Malaysia, is talking to Khalid, who's in Yemen.
In early January 2001, 2 photographs from the Kuala Lumpur meeting were shown to the joint source. One was a known photograph of Midhar, the other a photograph of an unknown subject. The joint source did not recognize Midhar, but he indicated he was 90% certain that the other individual was Khalid. This meant that Khalid and Midhar were 2 different people, but the fact that both had attended the meeting in Kuala Lumpur also meant there was a link between Khalid, a suspected leader in the coal bombing, the Kuala Lumpur meeting, and Midhar. Despite this new information, we found no effort by the CIA to renew the long-abandoned search for Midhar or his travel companions.
Because they knew where they were going.
In addition, we found that the CIA
Because,
did
now,
not
let
notify.
me add some context to that, because the CIA was not known to the commission, right? It's 2004. But because of the Canestraro documents and the latest revelations, we now know that the CIA was running an illegal operation with the Saudis. So when the CIA said they lost him at Bangkok, the CIA held a meeting, a principals meeting. Rich Blee, who is the chief of Alex Station, said that, hey, we lost Al-Midar and Al-Hazmi in Bangkok. We don't know where they are. What happened was, from Bangkok, Al-Midar and Al-Hazmi went to the United States. Who was directly meeting them? The Saudis. Fahad al-Tamari, Omar al-Bayoumi, okay? Who's operating this whole operation? The Islamic Affairs Attaché in Washington, D.C., Muassad al-Jar, who's actually named in the Operation Encore file. He's the one who gave Fahad al-Tamari the imam position at the King Fahd Mosque, and he also has connections with Al-Qaeda and Islamic terrorist organizations. That's the FBI saying this. Omar al-Bayoumi is acting as the logistical and financial coordinator between Al-Midar and Al-Hazmi. He got them an apartment in San Diego, told them to go from Los Angeles to San Diego. The first 2 weeks, Al-Midar and Al-Hazmi stood at a hotel paid for by Fahad al-Tamari. This is all related in the Operation Encore file. And the CIA knew this, because they were running a joint operation, which means that they were operating illegally inside the United States. This is the reason why they withheld information from the FBI.
The FBI of this identification until late August. DCI Tennant and Kofor Black testified before the joint inquiry that the FBI had access to this information from the beginning.
They're lying.
But based on extensive record, including documents that were not available to the CIA personnel who drafted that testimony, we conclude they were in error. The FBI's
No, they
primary
weren't.
coal
Hey, hold
investigators
on, Barbara here. They weren't in error. They lied. They fucking lied. That's it. Call it for what it is. And I mean, Carl Levin even states it from the interview of its own CIA analyst that he would not share this information regarding Al-Hazmi and Al-Midar being inside the United States unless he had authority to do so. Where's that authority coming from? The DCI. It's not coming from Black. It's not coming from the director of operations, James Pavitt. It's not coming from Tom Wilshire acting as a lone wolf. This is coming from the CIA's own director, who has the authority.
had no knowledge of Khalad's possible participation in the Kuala Lumpur meeting until after the September 11 attacks. This is an example of how day-to-day gaps in information sharing can emerge even in a situation of goodwill on all sides. The information was from a joint FBI-CIA source. The source spoke essentially no English. The FBI person on the scene overseas did not speak the languages the source spoke. Due to travel and security issues, the amount of time spent with the source was necessarily kept short. As a result, the CIA officer usually did not simultaneously translate either the questions or the answers for his accompanying FBI colleague and friend.
That's right, because the CIA officer knows exactly what this person was saying, Fahad al-Qusa. That's who's in the room with them. And he is saying that in the picture is Khalad, but that's not what the CIA case officer is telling the FBI. Why? Why? The fuck is going on?
For interviews without such simultaneous translation, the FBI agent on the scene received copies of the reports that the CIA disseminated to other agencies, but he was not given access to the CIA's internal operational traffic that contained more detail.
Why?
The information regarding the January 2001 identification of Khalad was only reported in operational traffic, to which the relevant FBI investigators did not have access. The CIA officer does not recall this particular identification and thus cannot say why it was not shared with his FBI colleague.
Line.
But he may have misunderstood the possible significance of the new identification. Midhar left the United States in June 2000. It is possible that if in January 2001, agencies had resumed their search for him or placed him on the tip-off watch list, they might have found him before or at the time Midhar applied for a new visa in June 2001.
Right.
Or they might have been alerted to him when he returned to the United States the following month. We cannot know. The second opportunity is in the spring of 2001, looking again at Kuala Lumpur. By mid-May 2001, as the threat reports were surging again, a CIA official detailed to the International Terrorism Operations Section at the FBI wondered where the attacks might occur. We will call him John. John recalled the Kuala Lumpur travel of Midhar and his associates around the millennium.
By the way,
he searched
the same Tom Wilshire who told Michelle Ann Casey to tell the FBI analysts acting as liaison officers at Alex Station, Doug Miller and Mark Rossini, to not share this information with FBI headquarters regarding Al-Midar and Al-Hazmi having dual U.S. visas and being inside the United States. Now he's working as a liaison officer for the U.S.'s coal bombing investigation at the FBI. You couldn't make this up. Now, is he really there for that, or is he trying to act as a fish, right? He's trying to hear chatter whether the FBI knows about Al-Hazmi and Al-Midar inside the United States. That very well could be the case as well. Well, he's working US's cold case, because the USS Cold Case has the three men that were at the Malaysia summit meeting that is very much on the FBI's radar. Khalid, Tawfiq Bidatash, Khalid al-Mihdhar, and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Because if the FBI makes that connection, they don't have to open an intelligence operation. There's a criminal investigation. That means that if al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi were located inside the United States, the FBI can arrest them. And that's not what the CIA wants, because they're running a joint operation with the Saudis regarding monitoring both of those men. Or is it something more? We don't know.
CIA's databases for information regarding the travel. On May 15th, he and another official at CIA re-examined many of the old cables from early 2000, including the information that Mihdhar had a U.S. visa and that Hazmi had come to Los Angeles on January 15, 2000. The CIA official who reviewed the cables took no action regarding these cables. She cannot recall this work. John, however, began a lengthy exchange with a CIA analyst to figure out what these cables meant. He recognized the relationship to the bombing case, and he was aware that someone had identified Khalid in one of the surveillance photographs from the Malaysia meeting. He concluded that something bad was definitely up.
Really?
Despite the U.S. links evident in this traffic, John did not raise that aspect with his FBI counterparts. He was focused on Malaysia. John's focus on the overseas target area might be understood from his description of the CIA as an agency that tended to play a zone defense. In contrast, he said, the FBI tends to play man-to-man. Desk officers at the CIA's bin Laden station did not have cases in the same sense as an FBI agent who works something beginning to end. Thus, when the trail went cold after the Kuala Lumpur meeting in January 2000, the desk officer moved on to different things. By the time the March 2000 cable arrived with information that one of the travelers had flown to Los Angeles, the case officer was not responsible for following up on that information. While several individuals at the bin Laden station opened the cable when it arrived in March 2000.
Right? Even though they knew that both members of Al-Qaeda, they're inside the United States. Let it pass. I'm not going to worry about it.
2000, it was no one's concern, and no action was taken. We discussed some of the management issues raised by this in January in Staff Statement Number 2. The CIA's zone defense concentrated on where, not who. Had its information been shared with the FBI, a combination of the CIA's zone defense and the FBI's man-to-man approach might have been far more productive.
Yes.
The third opportunity is in August 2001, when the search for Hazmi and Mihdhar begins and fails. During the summer of 2001, John asked an FBI official detailed to the CIA to review all of the Kuala Lumpur materials one more time. We will call her Mary. He asked her to do the research in her free time. She began her work on July 24th. That day, she found the cable reporting that Mihdhar had a visa to the United States. A week later, she found the cable reporting that Mihdhar's visa application, what was later discovered to be his first application, listed New York as his destination. On August 21st, she located the March 2000 cable that noted with interest that Hazmi had flown to Los Angeles in January 2000. She grasped the significance of this information.
Yeah.
Mary and an FBI analyst working the case, whom we will call Jane, promptly met with an INS representative at FBI headquarters. On August 22nd, INS told them that Mihdhar had entered the United States on January 15, 2000, and again on July 4th, 2001.
Now the jig is up.
Jane and Mary also learned that there was no record that Hazmi had left since January 2000, but they were not certain if he was still here and assumed that he had left with Mihdhar in June 2000. They decided that if Mihdhar was in the United States, he should be found. They divided up the work. Mary asked the bin Laden station to draft a cable requesting that Mihdhar and Hazmi be put on the tip-off watch list. Jane took responsibility for the search effort inside the United States. As the information indicated that Mihdhar had last arrived in New York and this was determined to be related to the bin Laden case in New York, she began drafting a lead for the FBI's New York field office. She called an agent in New York to give him a heads up on the matter, but her draft lead was not sent until August 28th. Her email told the New York agent that she wanted to get him started on this as soon as possible, but she labeled the lead as routine. A routine
not a
designation
criminal.
informs the receiving office it has 30 days to respond to the lead.
Right.
The agent who received the lead forwarded it to a squad supervisor. That same day, the supervisor forwarded the lead to an intelligence agent to open an intelligence case.
Not a
He
criminal.
also sent it to the coal case agents and an agent who had spent significant time in Malaysia searching for another Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The suggested goal of the investigation was to locate Midhar, determine his contacts and reasons for being in the United States, and possibly conduct an interview. Before sending the lead, Jane had discussed it with John, the CIA official on detail to the FBI, and with the acting head of the FBI's bin Laden unit. The discussion apparently was limited to whether the search should be classified as an intelligence investigation or as a criminal one. A legally important distinction for reasons we explained earlier today in staff statement number 9.
And how
Neither of
could
these
this
individuals-
have been a criminal investigation if the CIA basically told the FBI that we have information that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were seen with Khalid, the alleged mastermind of the coal bombing, and that they were not only seen together, but they were seen together at a high-level al-Qaeda meeting, would have been a criminal investigation. When? January of 2000. That would have ended 9/11, or part of it. At least part of it.
Apparently disagreed with the analyst's proposed plan. No one apparently felt they needed to inform higher levels of management in either the FBI or the CIA about the case. One of the coal case agents read the lead with interest and contacted Jane to obtain more information. Jane took the position, however, that because the agent was a designated criminal agent, the wall kept him from participating in any search for Midhar. In fact, she felt he had to destroy his copy of the lead because it contained information she believed could not be shared with any criminal agents. The joint inquiry covered the details of their heated exchanges, and we will not repeat them here. The result was that criminal agents who were knowledgeable about the coal and experienced with criminal investigative techniques, including finding suspects and possible criminal charges, were excluded from the search. Many witnesses have suggested that even if Midhar had been found, there was nothing the agents could have done except follow him onto the planes. We believe this is incorrect. Both Hazmi and Midhar could have been held for various immigration violations or as material witnesses in the coal bombing case. Investigation or interrogation of these individuals and their travel and financial activities also may have yielded evidence of connections to other participants in the 9/11 plot.
Right.
In any case, the opportunity did not arise. Notably, the lead did not draw any connections between the threat reporting that had been coming in for months and the presence of 2 possible al-Qaeda operatives in the United States. Moreover, there is no evidence that the issue was substantively discussed at any level above a deputy chief of a section within the counterterrorism division at FBI headquarters. The search was assigned to one FBI agent for whom this was his very first counterterrorism lead.
That shows
By the
you-
terms of the lead, he was given 30 days to open an intelligence case and make some unspecified efforts to locate Midhar. He started the process a week later. He checked local New York indices for criminal record and driver's license information and checked the hotel listed on Midhar's U.S. entry form.
Now, this
On
is
September
where-
11, the
now,
agent
Look, this is where if the CIA put Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi on the tip-off database, that this agent would have found them. Where they were, his history, how he got in the United States. And granted, we're talking about less than 2 weeks before the attacks. At least it would have been something. Again, another failure on the CIA.
sent a lead to Los Angeles based on the fact that Midhar had initially arrived in Los Angeles in January 2000. Time had run out on the search. We want to briefly mention two other incidents in the summer of 2001. The first, the Phoenix Memo. The Phoenix Memo was investigated at length by the Joint Inquiry. We recap it briefly in the statement that's provided to you. I just want to mention now, as its author told us, the Phoenix Memo was not an alert about suicide pilots. His worry was more about a Pan Am 103 scenario in which explosives were placed on an aircraft. The memo's references to aviation training were broad, including electronics and aircraft maintenance. And lastly, Moussaoui. On August 15, 2001, the Minneapolis FBI field office initiated an intelligence investigation on Zacarias Moussaoui. He had entered the country on February 23, 2001, and began flight lessons at Airman Flight School in Oklahoma City. He began flight training at the Pan American Flight Training School in Minneapolis on August 13th. Moussaoui had none of the usual qualifications for flight training on Pan Am's Boeing 747 flight simulators. Contrary to popular belief, Moussaoui did not say he was not interested in learning how to take off or land. Instead, he stood out because, with little knowledge of flying, he wanted to learn or take off and land a Boeing 747. The FBI agent who handled the case in conjunction with the INS representative on the Minneapolis Joint Terrorism Task Force suspected Moussaoui of wanting to hijack planes. Because Moussaoui was a French national who had overstayed his visa, he was detained by the INS. The FBI agent sent a summary of his investigation to FBI headquarters on August 18. In his message, he requested assistance from the FBI field office in Oklahoma City and from the FBI legal attaché in Paris. Each of these offices responded quickly. By August 24th, the Minneapolis agent had also contacted a detailee from the FBI and a CIA analyst at the Counterterrorist Center about the case. DCI Tennant was briefed about the Moussaoui case. He told us no connection to al-Qaeda was apparent to him before 9/11. Moussaoui had lived in London, so the Minneapolis agent also requested assistance from the legal attaché in London. The legal attaché promptly prepared a written request to the British government for information concerning Moussaoui and hand-delivered the request on August 21st. He informed the British of developments in the case on September 4th. The case, although handled expeditiously at the American end, was not handled by the British as a priority amid a large number of other terrorist-related inquiries. On September 11th, after the attacks, the legal attaché renewed his request for information. After 9/11, the British government, in response to U.S. requests, supplied some basic biographical information about Moussaoui. The British government has informed us that it also tasked intelligence collection facilities for information potentially relating to Moussaoui. On September 13th, the British received new, sensitive intelligence that Moussaoui had attended an al-Qaeda training camp in Afghanistan.
And by the way, what training camp was that? Khalidin. Same training camp where Ahmed Bassam was at. Now, Moussaoui had connections to Islamic fundamentalists in France. One such individual named Abu Hamza, who has a hook for a hand, he's currently doing life in the United States prison. I don't know where he is now, but that was enough for a FISA warrant to be approved. Now, there was some argument between Minneapolis FBI headquarters and the FISA courts because the FISA officers in Minneapolis had an argument with Harry Samet, the agent who arrested Moussaoui, about the legal definitions outlined in the FISA warrant. Needless to say that they couldn't look at Moussaoui's laptop or his possessions in his hotel room. Why? Because he's not an American citizen. And if he was an American citizen, we would just need a warrant, right, by a court. But because he's a foreign national, we need to show the connection between Moussaoui and radical fundamentalism. And as Barbara Gruey says here, that information was shared by British intelligence, which got information from the French. That was known to Minneapolis. And even still with that information, they rejected the FISA warrant. Now, Colleen Rowley, who I've interviewed, basically would write a scathing letter to Director Robert Mueller, stating that there was a high level of malfeasance on behalf of the radical fundamentalist unit under Bob Bowman and Dave Frasca, who had a huge disagreement with Harry Samad over the wording definitions of the FISA warrant. On September 11, 2001, because the attacks happened, then they went through Moussaoi's laptop. You can't make this stuff up.
It passed this intelligence to the United States that same day. Had this information been available in late August 2001, the Moussaoui case would almost certainly have received intense and much higher level attention. Prior to 9/11, there was a continuing dispute between FBI agents in Minneapolis and supervisors at headquarters about whether evidence had been sufficient to seek a FISA warrant to search Moussaoui's computer hard drive and belongings. After 9/11, the FBI learned that Millennium terrorist Osama, who was cooperating with investigators, could have recognized Moussaoui from the Afghan camps. Either the British information or the Osama identification would have broken that logjam. A maximum U.S. effort to investigate Moussaoui could conceivably have unearthed his connections to the Hamburg cell, though this might have required an extensive effort with help from foreign governments. The publicity about the threat also might have disrupted the plot, but this would have been a race against time.
To close up, Commissioners, the remainder of the statement covers 3 other topics, which we will not try to deliver orally here. The first of those is information issues. We itemize in our statement 5 information issues that are lessons that we have gathered from this story. Second, we offer a preliminary finding on a post-9/11 events. We offer our preliminary findings on the flights of Saudi nationals leaving the United States after 9/11, which has been a focus of some public attention. And finally, as part of the issues of threat and response in 2001, we describe some of the immigration law enforcement initiatives that were undertaken by Attorney General Ashcroft with the FBI and at times with other cabinet departments to try to disrupt terrorist activities using immigration laws after 9/11. That material is available in our staff statements, and with that, we conclude.
Yeah, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I close by saying that even with the commission even stating it, that there was an overwhelming amount of intelligence reports, threat reports about threat to civil aviation, that this information was not acted upon. And there's part of the cover-up. Now, who knows what Israel or Saudi Arabia collected? We don't know. And there's very little information, very little, regarding Israel, for the exception of the Gerald Shea memo. With the Saudis, it's a little bit more, but the State Department is still covering up for them, which confuses me because why do you people even vote if this is the case? If they're willing to do this to the loved ones of those killed on September 11th, what do they think of you? All right, so there's enough here. And now, with the amount of information that we have 19 years later, we have enough to warrant a new investigation with the new information that we have, on top of the information revealed by the commissions, which shows that domestic and foreign intelligence were inside the United States and monitoring the planes operations inside the United States, the people that were involved with the planes operation. It's not theory anymore. This is a fact. And we have to stop with these silly theories, and we have to stop the media cover-up and get responsible investigators to bring attention to the public about what is being covered up and what is being spread as misinformation on purpose, it seems. All right, guys, thank you for watching. See you in the next video.